In April, a Boeing engineer told this committee that he raised safety concerns with leadership at Boeing about some of the company's manufacturing processes. He told us that Boeing management then retaliated against him for raising those safety concerns. He went so far as to tell us that he felt that his physical safety had been threatened. Not only has your company failed to uphold the highest safety standards, it appears that Boeing has fostered a culture that censors people who try to speak up and help. But now, for the first time in decades, Americans are more and more nervous about flying your American-made planes. That breakdown in trust is a remarkable failure for your company, and I'm concerned that it stems from a decision to put profits ahead of safety. So what are the root causes of this systemic failure? How are you going to fix it? And who should we hold accountable?
What I would like to understand and would love to get just a quick response from you about is how do you plan to increase confidence in these new policies and the culture that you want your people, your greatest asset, to believe in if there's no visible consequences for the behavior that is allegedly disallowed? I'm sure you believe that they're motivated because they're producing product. Yeah. What I want, and I think what you want, is to have them to believe
trust the
that and to trust that your leadership is going to keep the traveling public safe and is going to help them build a solid future for their family. Yes. Why should they trust you?
Well, first, we do celebrate people who give us information that helps our operation. And even if it doesn't, we celebrate their willingness to speak up.
It is a moment of reckoning for Boeing that will help Boeing in the long run, because the only way to course correct is to face the truth and confront the need for action. And I'm asking you, shouldn't individuals be held accountable, individuals who are still at Boeing and who may be in positions of responsibility now? And I'm saying to you, and I'm saying to the Department of Justice, individuals should be held accountable, because that's the only way that deterrence works. And the reason they didn't know what was happening is Boeing concealed it. They concealed it from the FAA, and therefore Boeing was charged with defrauding the United States of America. And the prosecution was deferred because Boeing paid a fine, but no individual was held accountable. In my view, and I said it at the time, individuals should be held accountable for those deaths.
We have created a series of design practices, including a new one referred to as human factors. It speaks directly to the work that needed to be done to prevent MCAS from creating the environment that those pilots faced at that moment. So we did that. We established a safety management system. We learned from the FAA and from our airline customers what it was and how to implement it. We've been listening to it. We tuned that safety management system into every airplane that flies every second of every day, so that we could learn from those airplanes.
Let me be more specific, and I apologize for interrupting, but we're limited in terms of time. And yet the whistleblowers that we have heard, including testifying before this committee, have reported a host of retaliatory behaviors, from reassignment to exclusion from key meeting to being sidelined and sidetracked in their careers, verbal harassment and threats, and even physical violence. After whistleblower John Barnett raised his concerns about missing parts, he reported that his supervisor called him 19 times in one day and 21 times another day. And when Barnett asked his supervisor about those calls, he was told, quote, "I'm going to push you until you break." How can you reassure us that Boeing is going to, in fact, end this broken safety culture?
Senator, I'm going to start by assuring you that I listened to the whistleblowers that appeared at your hearing. And I know the sincerity of their remarks. And then, with respect to our company, we do have a policy. I often often cite and reward the people who bring issues forward, even if they have huge consequence. We survey our people with respect to, do they feel empowered to speak up? That survey performance gets better and better. It's never perfect. I think the board counts on me for transparency.
Really? Because you're under investigation for falsifying 787 inspection records. The Boeing's under criminal investigation for the Alaska Airlines flight. You were investigated by DOJ for criminal conspiracy to defraud the FAA. This is all in your tenure. This doesn't sound like a lot of transparency to me. What about safety? Is that a component of your salary?
It sure is, Senator. They gave us lots of great ideas on how they would train all the new people, how they would do most of that training on the job as opposed to the classroom. We dedicated many, many, many more hours to that training. We created...
I read it. It's about 300 additional hours that were dedicated to the...
We created a proficiency metric, not as a pay item, but simply recognition that from the senior folks, the junior folks are now proficient at the task and the job that they have. They know where the drawings are, they know the steps required to follow each of those drawings, and they don't need to have somebody next to them while they do it.
Well, I would suggest that the prosecution that is, in my view, almost certainly to result from the investigation underway. And I say again, as former federal prosecutor and state attorney general, I think that the evidence is near overwhelming to justify that prosecution, that there ought to be individual accountability and amounts that really reflect the harm done that are not deductible, as those amounts were.
Mr. McKenzie, you worked for Boeing for several decades, I understand. What happened to the safety culture there?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Well, I'll tell you, I've been in this role at Boeing just over a year. As you noted, I've been at Boeing for well over 3 decades. I'm in my 37th year. Starting out as an intern, going all the way through today. I can tell you that in the last several years, and I speak for the engineering team at Boeing, they are extraordinarily focused on safety. We've done several structural changes. I can tell you that in the last several years, and I speak for the engineering team at Boeing, they are extraordinarily focused on safety. We've done several structural changes to the engineering function. We have aligned the engineering function into one organization. We now have the most engineers that ever populated the Boeing company inside Boeing, over 64,000 engineers. We have defined functional chief engineers for every one of our functional disciplines, including human factors. We have built out and developed a robust system of what's called design practices, where we are codifying every technical learning and lesson on how we do things at Boeing.
But sir, you're an engineer.
We're focused on preventing the design problem from ever happening again. Human factors, a whole new team, a whole new approach, a set of disciplines around it, et cetera. Alaska, very different. That was a manufacturing miss. That is what our quality action plan is all about. I believe while there was a very discreet miss with respect to the documentation of removal of that door plug, which caused this to escape our factory, while that happened, and it was a discrete instance on one airplane, we have tried to look at literally everything we do to make certain that that can never happen again. And that is what our quality plan is about, and that is what we're up to. These issues were attributed to the development of the airplane and a software package referred to as MCAS. And there, we took responsibility for that error.
You accept that Boeing was responsible for those crashes and 346
I
deaths?
accept that MCAS and Boeing are responsible for those crashes.
News broke last week that the Federal Aviation Administration is investigating how counterfeit titanium, originally from a Chinese supplier, made its way into Boeing planes. What systemic failures allowed Boeing to not only purchase questionable titanium, but to fail to recognize that it was substandard once you had it in your possession and to install it in an aircraft? How'd that happen?
Senator, we did not purchase the titanium. A sub-tier would have purchased that titanium, and we would not be aware until they raised their hand and let us know, in which case we would help them immediately solve that problem. Back when Russia invaded Crimea, we made a determination immediately following that invasion that we would end our dependency on Russia for titanium.